I think we are ready to roll. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the first webinar in a Meet Your Farmers webinar series. We're focusing on community supported agriculture today, also known as CSAs. I'm Amy Mateus. I'm the program director for the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience, and I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Gordon. He is the communications and event manager, and he'll be supporting us with tech today. So a couple notes on that. As I said, you will be muted upon entry. Please stay muted throughout the presentation as we are recording. We are also live streaming this event, so please turn your camera off if you are uncomfortable with having your face on a recording of this. We'll have time at the end to answer questions and have a little discussion. And we absolutely invite you to turn your cameras on and come off mute during that time period. I would also just like to add that you have a chat box. Usually it's at the far bottom right hand corner of your screen. Add any questions or comments into that. We will address comments towards the end and questions towards the end, but if there's any tech issues, you can drop them in the chat box as well. I would like to start off today by acknowledging that we are located here in Haley, Idaho. This is the land of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. I am located very close to the Big Wood River, and I'd just like to express my gratitude for the abundance of resources we have in this region, and my hope that as we steward these resources, we may do so for generations to come. Okay, I think, did you all see that screen jump over? Awesome. Okay, so we will cover a quick introduction from both of our farmers, benefits of CSAs, things to consider, your 2021 options and some share examples, and then we'll jump into those questions. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to two farmers here in the Wood River Valley. First, we have Lookout Farm, represented by Simon today. Simon, if you could give us a brief introduction, a little bit about yourselves, your farming practices, the vision and mission of Lookout, where you're located, and where people can find your product. And make sure you're unmuted, please.
Hello, everyone. Well, thanks, Amy, for moderating this. Thanks, Mike, and everyone else at LFA SVI for putting on this webinar and the whole series. I hope everyone else joins the other ones too. It's going to be fun. For those of you who don't know, Lookout Farm, we're in Bellevue, just south of Bellevue. If you're leaving town, you'll see off the highway our tunnels, greenhouse. My wife and I moved here in 2018. This is our third growing season and third year doing a CSA program. Since my wife and I met 10 years ago as young farmers, the CSA model has always been sort of our chief inspiration for growing food and how to grow food in a community. So I'm glad we're here today to talk about the CSA model. Yeah, when we first ran a CSA 8 years ago, and it just blew our minds how much room to grow there is in connecting food production to community life. Just growing for families, having people to the farm, sharing meals, teaching people how to grow vegetables. The CSA model is for all of that and can do that almost infinitely. And that's really our inspiration as an organization. We took the dive here in the Wood River Valley because our communities here are enthusiastic and supportive, and we want to do our part in growing our small communities to have the type of connection that I'm talking about. In terms of our actual farm, we are on a hay field that we are slowly taking over. We have transitioned 3 acres to vegetable production. We have our first greenhouse and high tunnels in that are helping us grow in this climate, which you all understand is challenging. And we'll be adding to that infrastructure as we grow, just to increase our capacity to grow in the shoulder seasons. In terms of how we produce crops, we don't till, we have permanent beds. We only do surface bed preparation before planting operations, and you can ask all about that later in this hour. We try to tell ourselves that we need to give back more than we take from the soil. We don't spray pesticides or anything synthetic. We just, as much as we can, think of the farm as an ecosystem that We are taking on as a long-term project as stewards for the soil and the water and the habitat. We're always trying to ask ourselves, how can we improve? So that is how we think of producing a vegetable. There's so much behind what a vegetable is, which is namely the farm, which is a piece of land and the whole community behind it. And that's where the CSA comes in. Some of our goals moving forward, as well as the CSA, are just to keep slowly growing. We're going to be expanding this year, another couple acres. We're doing a transition project of our hayfield with the Sun Valley Institute. We can talk more about that later too. But yeah, we're going to just try to keep growing more food and diversify our market channels and always keep affordability as one of our main goals. But our biggest goal is just connection to the community around us. And that's why we're here talking CSA. So that's the little introduction. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Simon. Great to hear more about your background and your visions. And Sara and Ed, would love for you to come off mute. And Simon, I will remind you just to mute yourself again while they're talking so we eliminate that feedback. Sara and Ed are with Squash Blossom Farm, located in just south of Bellevue, I guess technically in Blaine County. And I'll let them take it away from there.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here today, and to Amy and Sun Valley Institute for running this. So we have Squash Blossom Farm. We're located in Muldoon Canyon, just on the east side of the town of Bellevue. Technically Blaine County, the line's like at the end of our road. And this will be our 6th year running a CSA, 5th year at the Ketchum Farmers Market. So we have our home farm here. We have 7 acres where we live, and we grow about an acre of vegetables here. We have a handful of high tunnels and caterpillar tunnels to help us with the short season challenges that Simon mentioned. And then we also are expanding just out of the canyon. Ed will talk about that in a second. But we love growing vegetables, and this community is such a special place to do that. We've had incredible support from day one from the community as customers and friends and people excited to learn and help. And like Simon was saying, we see our operation as kind of this holistic mission where growing the vegetables is our main priority and our financial motivator, but on our property, we manage it as a whole ecosystem. And so we do a lot of work with conservation plantings, pollinator plantings, and kind of just making sure that our ecosystem that growing vegetables is a huge part of is also balanced out with more diverse plants and animals and insects to make it all sustainable, both ecologically and for us being able to do this long term. And do you want to talk about Idaho?
Sure. So we're super happy and excited to announce that we're hopefully found our forever home for farming at Idaho Ranch. And so we're expanding our operation out to the ranch this year. It's a 1,000-acre ranch, but we're going to have a small 6-acre garden out there. And that's going to fit into a kind of a bigger community of poultry. There's going to be beekeeping. There's going to hopefully be some livestock that will be all different members of our community taking that on. But our 1-acre garden here, we kind of maxed as much as we could do production wise, where we felt like we were starting to be a little bit extractive to our soils. And we really wanted to move to a larger garden where we can concentrate on not only our rotations, but growing the more nutrient dense foods. And so we're really excited to have a larger plot, not all in vegetables, but a lot more in cover crops and be able to feed back into the soils. So that's our big excitement for the years to move out there.
And it's really exciting because it's just about 2 miles out the canyon from our home farm. So as Amy kind of touched on, it's basically the same conditions, I think, as far as climate and weather, and just a short jaunt down the road from us. Really quickly, our CSA comprises about a third of our business. We also do farmers market and wholesale to grocery stores and restaurants. Those are approximately a third each as well. We run an 18-week CSA June through October with pickup points at various places in the valley. We offer 2 different sizes, so it can kind of work depending on what your family's vegetable intake needs are. And let's see, we also offer a different option called market credit, where you can still buy in to support our farm, but kind of have some more flexibility and shop what you want from us. And we can talk more details about that later.
Great, thank you for that. We will get into those details of the CSAs later, and we have them on the slides for people so you can read them if you just kind of did not catch everything Sara went over. So thank you for those introductions. It was great to learn more about your operations, you all as people, and some of those visions you have for the long term. So we are now going to jump into just a basic overview of what is community supported agriculture. So CSAs, you'll commonly hear that. That stands for community supported agriculture. It's really a production and marketing model where consumers like me or Mike or our friends and family buy into the farm ahead of time at a set price and receive in payment, kind of like your return on investment, a certain set amount of crops. Those crops could be livestock, they could be fresh vegetables, they could be flowers, they could be herbs, they could be dairy. We're talking here specifically about seasonal fresh vegetables, but CSAs comes in all shapes and sizes and models. So you can really find anything that your heart desires. Some CSAs can go year round, some CSAs are short, like Sara and Ed's is an 18-week. I think look out your 26-week, so a little bit of a longer season there. So each farm is going to be different depending on their growing practices, their land, the resources they have available, and kind of the time that they want to work. You might be able to grow year round, doesn't mean that you actually want to farm year round. So giving yourself breaks too is always nice. So that's a basic overview of what a CSA is. CSAs are not really attributed to being created by any one person, but there's a deep history of a lot of great ideas that came out in the late 1800s and early 1900s from the biodynamic movement, as well as some of the Black agriculturalists in Tuskegee University brought together this idea. So there's a lot of people who led us towards CSAs that now I think a lot of folks are aware of, they see often in their communities, and we're lucky to have a few options here of Wood River Valley grown produce for Wood River Valley consumers. So just to cover a couple of those benefits, I think the benefits are relatively simple and straightforward. You are helping farmers at the beginning of the season get a cash influx to buy seeds, to buy soil amendments, to put in irrigation, to help them with upfront costs like labor to help planting before they actually have a revenue stream come in at the farmer's market or when plants are actually ready to harvest and grow. So it really helps farmers get that upfront cash influx to pay for the most expensive part of the season. It also helps farmers with consistent planting plans and schedules. So if you know that you have 50 CSAs, you can plan your plants more accordingly. Gosh, that's a hard one for me to say. Versus if you're only selling at the farmer's market, you might sell out all of your broccoli one week and none the next week. And the CSA really helps to find that balance between them. Sara kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier. You don't necessarily want to rely solely on a CSA, but it's a great option to diversify those income streams for market gardeners. It also helps with reducing marketing during the busy part of the season. So up front, when there's still snow on the ground, you're really pushing the CSAs. Then once your products are coming off the fields, you're not out there marketing and trying to sell all the kohlrabi you harvest. You already have 50 or 100 families that are ready to receive those products week after week. It also really helps to build community. Both of our farmers talked about how they've grown their community through CSAs. Sometimes CSA farms will offer tours or dinners or some type of events that bring people together that are all CSAs members. So a lot of those benefits are the same for consumers, right? You support your local farmers, you build local community. You can also be exposed to new varieties of fruits and vegetables and new cooking methods. Both of our farmers here today include recipes in their CSA shares, which can introduce you to new styles of cooking, new flavor combinations, and also just new vegetables that maybe you've never heard of or always have been a little nervous to pick up at the grocery store. So beyond that exposure, you're also receiving fresh, nutrient-dense, locally grown, organically grown fruits and vegetables, which is a really wonderful thing to have consistent and reliable all season long. So those are some of the benefits. And then I didn't want to call them pros and cons because I think like every situation is nuanced. So one pro for me might be a con for someone else. So these are just some things to consider. CSAs are usually a large upfront cost. That can be a deterrent for people that might not have extra spending income. A lot of farmers will also work out payment plans with people. Like you could split it up into 2 or 3 different payments to help with that. One of the biggest, I guess, quote unquote cons for me is that you don't actually get to choose your product. So you're giving the power to the farmer for them to choose what goes in your CSA for you. That can be a wonderful thing. It can really help if you're busy and you don't like grocery shopping and you don't want to think about it, that you just get a fresh bag of veggies at your door every week. For other people, having a market share option where you're actually just buying credit to use later, that can let you still support a CSA farmer without actually having to give up the power to choose what produce you want. The other piece of that is really about logistics and delivery. Some people that have full-time jobs or you have a lot of kids, you might not be able to make up those pickup locations. So considering that into your decision whether or not a CSA is right for you. I know Lookout Farm has an additional cost for home delivery. I'm not sure if Squash Blossom says yes, they do the same thing. So like if the resource of the financial is not a barrier and you can pay extra for home delivery, that's a really nice, convenient option too. And the last line here is that kind of market credit or market CSA idea. So similar to a gift card, you're buying it ahead of time and that's just putting cash on an account for you to use later in the season. So we'll walk through that a little bit more when we get into the details about Squash Blossom's 2021 offerings. So I think that kind of covers our benefits and considerations, unless our farmers have anything they want to add or expand on that I spoke to. Feel free to jump in, either all of you, any of you. No? All right, looks like I covered it. Awesome. So now we'll kind of jump into the actual details of our 2 farms that are represented here today. So Lookout Farm offers 2 options for their CSA products. One's a full share and the other's a half share. The full share, both of the shares go from late May to mid-November. The full share is every week, the half share is every other week. You also will receive a 20% off discount at their farmers market stand. You can see that we did a little calculations at those rates. You're looking at $25 to $28 per week. 8 to 10 varieties of produce comes in your weekly share. One of the things that I was really impressed with Lookout Farm is they have a sponsorship program for people to gift CSAs to members of the community. They also, if you're like on vacation or out of town for the week and are going to miss out on your share, you have the option to donate that share. And I think those go to the advocates. So I really appreciate that community building piece of it. Simon, do you want to add anything to your shares that I maybe didn't cover?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add, 26 weeks is a lot of weeks in a row, right? And so there's really not anyone who is not going to miss a week or going away for a few weeks, and that's okay. We try to have options for you. You can either use the credit for that share or 2 shares or 3 shares at the market stand later. You can donate it to the advocates, like Amy said. You could double up on your CSA the week after you've missed, for instance. So there's different ways to be flexible about getting all the food that you have signed up for. And that is important for us because, we don't want you to feel stressed about not being there for your share, or if you miss your delivery, you can't be there. Oh, no, that's we try to be attentive to our members and make it as easy as possible for everyone.
Yeah, really appreciate that flexibility. We all know a lot of us escape for at least a week every summer. So it's nice to know that that produce will be available to us in the future or shared with someone else in the community. Our next slide is just a little overview of like what shows up in your CSA box. So you can see this is an example. Simon, do you know what time of year, what week this would have been in? I forgot to ask you that ahead of time, but.
Now that looks like August to me.
Okay, awesome. So this would be an example of one of the CSA shares that comes sometime in July or August. So you can see there's an assortment of products. And within this, both of our farmers here today include recipes, which I think is really helpful. Really tasty ways to use their ingredients. Oftentimes like this one, you know, there's a couple things that are in this recipe that they give you. So you can see the way that that CSA can be incorporated into a meal or into a snack throughout the week. So I really appreciate the recipes. I think it's a nice touch for people. So now we'll talk about Squash Blossoms offerings. And, you know, when we started planning this, we thought that they would definitely have CSAs available. They're really popular, which is great. Their 6th year. We're glad that the community supports them so much. So they are sold out of their traditional CSA shares this season. So get on their list for next year because they sold out in like 2 weeks, which is great. But they also offer a market credit program. And this is a really cool option, in my opinion, because like I said before, it gives you money to spend at the farmers market stands where like 1 week you could buy $100 worth of produce for a small family get together you're having, or you could, you know, just grab yourself your head of lettuce 1 week, and it doesn't matter the amount or quantity that you have or what you buy that week, you just have credit that you can always use. It's also really nice that like you don't have to bring money to the farmers market booth. So I just like walk up and Sara writes me down that I got this stuff today, and they're keeping track of how much people are spending on their end, which is a really nice option. They also, with that program, they add an additional 10% off your purchase. So if you buy $200 of market credit program, they'll give you 220, or if you buy 400, you'll get 440. That market credit is only good for the 2021 farmers market season. So when you purchase it now, you'll use it from now until October. Anything else to add in about that, Sara or Ed, that I missed or did not explain well?
No, I think you did a really good job explaining it. Thank you. And sorry that we're sold out of our traditional CSA. We were really excited this year to have our highest retention rate that we ever had. So the vast majority of members from the past have returned, which like we've been talking about, really emphasizes that community aspect of the CSA, and like having people that are members of our farm for years on end is really special. So the market credit is another good option, especially if you don't want to commit to the full CSA and have that flexibility.
I have 2 questions for you, Sara.
Yeah.
Can you share how many CSAs that you had this year available? And then will you be expanding it as you expand to the 6 acres?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Every year there in the winter, there's a conversation of like, how big do we want our CSA to be? How like what percentage of our business do we want it to be? And we've been all over the map every, winter. And last year, as we were planning for the 2020 season, we were pretty sure that we were going to scale back our CSA pretty significantly. We had been at like 55 members in 2019. And there are parts from the producer's end of a CSA that are super stressful. Like you have all these people that have given you hundreds and hundreds of dollars in, like right now, there's snow on the ground, and then you have to grow the vegetables. You owe it to them. And so that is kind of intense. And there's parts of that also being we set a really high standard for ourselves. We really want to deliver on that. And we really want to give them consistent, wide variety of super high quality vegetables every single week for the CSA. And so, like I was saying, last winter, we were like, we don't want to do it as big. Like, we're going to dial it back and increase our wholesale. Like, that's going to be our business model. And then about a week later, COVID hit, and that was all thrown to the wind. And suddenly all these people are staying home, thinking about where they're getting food and other resources. And it kind of changed the dynamic a lot. And so we switched immediately, and we're like, just keep it open, let it get as big as whatever, whoever wants to be part of this, we're going to make it happen. And if that means scaling back our offerings at the farmers market, we didn't even know at that point if the farmers market was going to happen, or, you know, maybe naturally it would shift a little bit away from restaurants because of them not being as busy. Anyway, long explanation. It got a lot bigger last year, and it was awesome. So we're kind of rolling with that. And so this will be our biggest year ever. I think we have 82 families signed up. And it's still scary. Like, we still owe people thousands of dollars worth of vegetables and haven't planted a single thing yet in the ground. But it is, it's pretty cool to have that consistent community. And I think we will keep it around that. I don't think we'd ever get bigger than 100 total, like maxed out in future years. And just to touch on the 6 acres out at Idaho, we will never have that full 6 acres in vegetables. It'll allow us to probably have at most 3 to 3.5 in vegetables, and the rest in long-term cover crop rotations to help keep up soil health and implement some regenerative practices there, instead of, like Ed was saying, extracting over and over and over.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I did see a question in the chat about how many members are part of CSAs. So Sara, you answered that. So this year, about 82, hundreds max, in the past, like 50 or so, depending on the year and how much risk you all want to take. Or, and then Simon, what about you? How many CSA members do you take per year?
Well, we are growing from last year. We are hoping to have about 110 members this year. So we've still got plenty of spots. So head over to our website, and that's where you would sign up. But yeah, we 110 is a lot. Everything Sara is saying is spot on. I mean, it's a lot of trust that our members put in us, which feels amazing, and it's very inspiring. But there's a lot of work to do, and it's very gratifying once those first shares in June start rolling around. You feel like, okay, this is great. Everyone's happy, giving and taking and giving, and it's really fun. So yeah, that's our number right now. We don't know in the future how big we'll grow, but for us so far, the CSA is over 50% of our business.
Okay. Great. So our next slide was just another look into like what you would receive in a CSA from Squash Blossom. So that fresh list and also a recipe. Again, we had a couple people comment in the chat. They love the recipes. I agree with that. I think it's always helpful to see like how other people cook or what other people are eating, especially when they're your farmers, because they're most likely very, very much aware of what they're growing and how to make it taste the best. So I think with that, we're kind of moving into our questions section. On the page right now that's up, you'll see some contact info, websites, Instagram and Facebook handles. Follow and support our farmers, reach out to them with questions, check out their websites. We do, say purchase a CSA or get your market credits for these farmers now, because we're supporting, as they share, they're getting ready to plant in the next month or so, couple months. So things are off to a busy start. I will just quickly say before we go into Q&A session, we have a series of these happening. We're calling this a Meet Your Farmer series. You can register for the series at the link. Mike will also drop that in the chat box. Our next one is happening on March 31st. It's all about small grains. So we'll hear from Brett at Hillside Grain, the new flour mill in Bellevue, and 1,000 Springs Mill, which operates down in Buell. Please do register. We hope you join us for those. Back to our question section. I think we have a couple coming in the chat. Oh, yes, the Ketchum Farmers Market will have an online option. I'm like 98% sure that will happen again this year. Sara, do you have any more info on that?
We have not, so I'm on the board of the Ketchum Farmers Market. We haven't had a spring meeting yet to like set anything in stone, but the general consensus among the board last year was that it was very positive addition to the farmers market. So I think we will have the online option. I'm not sure if we'll have the drive-through like pickup thing as segmented off as it was. It kind of just depends on how the situation with COVID is and health concerns and all of that. But like overall, we feel like the online pre-order was something that will continue in the foreseeable future.
Great, thank you for answering that. At this point, anyone who wants to ask a question and show their face and come on screen is welcome to do so. I will stop my screen share so that we can see each other. Let's see, stopping it now. Okay, there we are. So feel free to submit any questions into the chat. I don't see any more coming up yet, but I'll be on the lookout for those. And if anyone has questions, like you could raise your hand and we can, or just unmute. Dick, it looks like you unmuted. Go for it.
I just unmuted so I could hear everyone else. Well, Eddie. All right. So I have a question. Do either of you have any plans to possibly expand your CSA in the future into winter months?
If either of you want to jump in and speak to that, go for it.
Sure, I can start. Yeah, well, our goal is to slowly chip away at our shoulder seasons. So our main season CSA will grow. We do have on the table in the future the idea to offer a winter CSA, which would be a much smaller membership. In terms of scale of vegetables to the summer CSA, it'd be much less. But we need to build our infrastructure up more in order to make that kind of winter CSA happen. But I'm right there with you. We would all love more fresh vegetables in the winter. So we're all thinking about it every year. And if we can get our operation up to a critical mass and having that infrastructure in place and the labor, then that would be great.
Thanks, Simon. Sara and Ed, do you all have anything you want to add?
At this time, I think that we're not planning on expanding our CSA program into the winter months. We would like to try to do a little bit more shoulder season production on lettuce and then be able to offer our root crops and other storage crops through the winter. But right now we're really kind of trying to concentrate on the seasonality and when the sun's out, growing what we can, and then taking a much needed break in the wintertime.
Great, thank you. We had a couple questions come in. Speak to organic options. I'll preface this and say that there is certified organic USDA standards that I don't think either of our farmers currently have. I think both of our farmers would identify as being beyond organic, where they're meeting those minimum standards and oftentimes going above and beyond that. So I do think maybe Simon and Brianna are in process of organic certification. So I'll just start with that and let either of them jump in and speak to that question directly.
Yeah, sure. You know, we don't think the organic certification is the most important thing in the world, because Amy's right. We are trying to think more critically and comprehensively and creatively than just an organic certification would dictate. But we are starting that process. We do think in a few years to have that certification will just be good for people who are like to see that we are doing that and keeping ourselves up to those standards. It's not a bad thing, but certainly the first 2 years of our operation, we were most focused on growing our practices, which are very natural. And we'll get to that organic certification pretty soon, but it takes a few years. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a 3-year process, just so people do know. If you say you want an organic certification, you have to go through 3 years of transition before you can receive that certification. Go ahead, Sarah.
We haven't thought about going after the certified organic paperwork certification because we just haven't wanted to concentrate on the hoops you have to jump through to get it. And we haven't been pulled by our community or our customers to do that. We have an open door policy and people can come out and see what we're doing. And, you know, we're comfortable with that. We are doing the best practices that we can to grow vegetables. And as of this time, we just haven't been pulled in the direction of needing a certification.
But yeah, I would say that we fall under, if you want to call it beyond organic or just natural or whatever.
Regenerative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not using, you know, any chemical or synthetic inputs on the farm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. We also had a question about greenhouses. So I know that you all each have structures on your farms. Can you describe what you use those structures for, like starting seeds, extending the season, protecting certain things at certain times of year? And my guess is that question is actually talking about that like extended season. So maybe just start with whatever you want to share about the greenhouses that you already use, how you use them, and do you see that expanding at all?
Sure, I'll go. So we have multiple structures and the most significant ones are what are generally referred to as hoop houses. So it's what you would think of as a greenhouse, but with soft plastic, like 6 mil rollout plastic, not structural glass or polycarbonate. So it has its limitations. Obviously, there's no insulative properties at all to that. So we're not, you know, we don't have a lush, warm growing space year round. Our main thing, again, is to just extend as much as we can early and late to bump those shoulders out a little bit. And then we also have a big hoop house that's heated, whose primary role is for seed starting, and starts with such a short season. We have to be starting seeds basically starting now and through February in order to get our plants up to the place where they're large enough to go into the ground after our frost-free date to then produce and be yielding fruit, especially fruiting plants, before it freezes again. So our coverage structure for starts is just as much, if not more, a valuable element on our farm than the structures that we use to grow greens and less sensitive things on the shoulder seasons. We also have what are called caterpillar tunnels, and it's more of a low tech, low investment covered growing option. They are like 14 feet
14 feet
wide
by
50 or 100, however long you want it to make it. And that that's been a really nice way for us to, without spending tons of money on like a true building, get some covered space and get more crops growing early and late.
Great, thanks for giving us the overview of those different types of structures and what they're used for. Simon, do you want to speak to the structures you all have at Lookout?
Sure, yeah. We have a similar situation in which our only actually heat added building on the farm is our propagation house. So that's where we're just starting all our plants, as Sarah said, right now. Aside from that, in terms of growing crops in the grounds, it's just unheated covered spaces. We have a couple big walk-in high tunnels. We use some caterpillar tunnels. We'll probably be, and both of those are important. They offer different benefits for different growing environments, different uses over the course of the year. So hopefully we will be adding more in both of those categories. You know, if we were to ever make that plunge into the winter CSA, you're talking more of the greenhouses along the kind of, that is the prop house, the propagation house right now, which is a bigger investment to have something you can heat and maintain and all that. But yeah, it's the name of the game. And I know Zinader, they do a lot of double covering, which is what we do a lot too, where we have our houses and then the plants have mini houses inside their houses. maybe even mini houses inside those mini houses. Because, you know, it's super cold here, and stress on certain plants can be very cumulative. So the more you can help them, the better. So if you ever want to see something that is a farm but looks like not a farm, you should come to the farm in April and May and come into some of these tunnels. You go, where are the plants? They're absolutely covered up.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. I think it helps people understand like that we are living in a very tough climate. It is cold, like it can freeze any night of the summer. So protecting those crops is really critical, especially when you're a commercial grower and your livelihood relies on those crops not freezing. Around that question around freezing and seasons, we had a question come in of like, what's the frost-free date you aim for planting? Do you all want to talk about that? When do you start putting crops in?
Frost-free day is a tricky one. We aim around the first week of June that we hope will be our frost date, but it's always going to frost at least once more after that. We'll start putting crops in the ground in March, but it's very variety specific. So there's certain things that can handle being out in that cold weather with a cover or two, and then we're kind of working successions into, you know, our basil or tomatoes might not go into an unheated tunnel until that first week of June. But generally it's around the first to third week of June that we might get through our last spring frost.
Simon, you want to speak to that at all?
Oops. Okay, can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah, June is a crazy month. We aim for June, the second week of June, but that's a placeholder for a lot of those crops, and it's a dance with watching the weather and how mature and desperate some of your crops are in the greenhouse. And I think with experience year after year after year, you can kind of manage that dance a little more. But you can't know, that's for sure. You can't know. You take what comes in terms of the weather.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the frost-free thing is, you know, we're planting a lot of crops before the last frost comes anyways, and a lot of the crops that people can grow here are cool season crops where they do okay in the colder weather, like kale and spinach and arugula. They can handle a little bit colder weather than eggplants, peppers, tomatoes. So when you shop with your local farmers, you might see a year where it's cold, they might not have a lot of tomatoes or peppers, and they might have kale and spinach all year round. And that's speaking to the climate that we live here in. We did have another question about solar, and Randy, I'll ask, like, if you want to unmute and ask your question. If I'm not translating it well, please do. So they asked about sun, like any interest in solar, and I'm going to interpret that question to be about greenhouses. Is there interest in solar thermal greenhouses? Because you all obviously use sun to grow plants. So I'm going to narrow it down, and Randy, if I'm wrong, feel free to provide that feedback or unmute and ask the question in the way that is your meaning to ask it.
Well, I can answer it as you framed it, Amy. I mean, solar thermal or solar hot water radiation greenhouses are super cool. I was fortunate to be able to work in a pretty cool setup at the Sage School with their greenhouse there, which has solar hot water heated tubes running through their raised beds. So they're able to grow all year round. Our question that we always ask ourselves is like, what is it worth the investment? And so that those systems have such a high investment on putting in the infrastructure that we, no matter how hard we've tried, haven't been able to validate it. We haven't been able to make it pencil out for the amount that we'd be able to make back on it growing greens through the winter on our scale. You know, I think if you are much bigger scale and have a huge market at your fingertips, it's totally doable and makes a lot of sense. But for us, we just haven't really been able to figure out how to make that level of an investment worth it for us. And like Ed said, like we we work really, really hard in the season, and we do like to maintain a off season to some degree so that we can keep doing this for a really long time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those details. I think it's nice for people to see, like, just because you have the technology where you could do something doesn't, one, mean it makes sense business wise, and two, doesn't mean it makes sense for your own personal work-life balance. So everyone needs a vacation, farmers too. Simon, do you have anything you want to speak to about solar thermal, or maybe even just like renewable energy with greenhouses?
You know, right now, I mean, of course, we're interested. It is so cool, but we don't have any plans for it. I think over the next 10, 20 years, all of us are going to be thinking about strategies like that to improve our energy use. You know, we don't like burning the amount of fuel we have to burn in March to keep certain things warm. But yeah, the cost-effective question is more pressing for us at the moment. But you know, these questions will fall in our laps, I'm sure, for the decades to come. So the answer is yes, we should all be thinking about it, but that's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know, there are some like zoning and permitting things that you get into when you have structures that are rigid year round, structures that have roofs that you have to shovel snow off of. As soon as you start to get into those type of greenhouse-like structures, zoning and permitting becomes a little bit more complicated than just hoop houses where you can remove the plastic at the end of the winter season. So those are also considerations for small farmers, because those can be a lot of hoops to jump through. They can be cost of barriers, etc. So Randy, I hope that answered your questions about the solar greenhouses. I don't have any other questions in the chat, but we definitely have more time. I think, is that Dick raising his hand? Yeah, go ahead.
But I was just going to tell the man who asked that question, or Sara, or Simon, last fall, and I think you've seen it, Amy, we built a solar greenhouse that's it's about 40 by 16, and built it totally out of straw, except for the glazing, of course. But and it's pretty darn inexpensive, and it's been pretty darn effective. And if any of those people would be interested in seeing it, they're welcome to come down to the farm.
Thank you for that offer, Dick. I hope people will take you up on that. I know there's a lot of really cool, innovative things that people are doing with greenhouses. I personally, we have a little lean-to greenhouse off the side of my yard, or off the side of my house, and we have it hooked up to hot water, like a RV hot water heater. And that heats it. It's like less than 100 square feet. It's expensive because you're paying for the electric of a hot water heater and a pump, but it worked really nicely. There's also geothermal using air and or hot water. So there are some innovations out there. I think they're very cost prohibitive for most commercial growers at the scale we're talking to today. But like Simon said, hopefully we see some innovation happen where it becomes more affordable and more doable for farmers, and it just becomes the norm in the next 10 years, 20 years. And I think we will see that happen in our lifetime. All right, everyone. Let's see. Did you choose the Caterpillar tunnel over other options? Does it hold up with weather challenges? Another Caterpillar tunnel question. Either of you want to jump in? Are there other options, and how does it hold up in weather?
Caterpillar tunnels were new to us last year, and we decided to go that direction because of price per square foot covered. And it's a very inexpensive option for us to get plastic covered growing space. And it allows us to cover quite a bit more growing area for the same financial amount. And so we're kind of going in that direction even farther this year, because if we go with one tunnel, if it's a big tunnel, it's maybe 30 by 100 versus I can get quite a few Caterpillar tunnels for that space, which give me a lot more flexibility. I can move them during the growing season. do cool season crops, warm season crops. And so we found them to be super advantageous to us. They are challenging with the weather conditions. Wind is kind of a terrifying thing with caterpillar tunnels. You have a large volume
We don't have as
and
much
a
wind.
very lightweight structure. So anchoring is super important. We've kind of changed the design a little bit from what is sold commercially to work better in the wind. And they worked great for us last year. You know, we had some pretty windy days and we had no damage at all. Possibly this year could be different, but you know, we're expanding. We're doing quite a few more tunnels. When we look at growing something, you know, we need a lot of product for it to actually, you know, feed our community. And so one tunnel just doesn't work for us. It's a lot of money and you end up with 100 pounds of lettuce. You know, we were looking to do more. And so having 8 smaller tunnels ends up being a lot better of an option in our direction. So we like the caterpillar tunnels.
And we did just partly intentionally and partly not intentionally end up leaving one up over the winter. And it's done great. We haven't had super heavy snow or really any big wet storms, but it mostly has shed the snow and been pretty manageable. It's something you definitely have to pay attention to in the weather, but there's some dormant spinach in there that we're hoping kicks back into life here one of these days.
Nice. Don't tell us too much. We'll push you to grow food all winter long. Simon, do you have anything to add about caterpillar tunnels and weather and all that?
The only thing I have to add is that Ed and Sarah have driven by our farm and seen some of our wind ravaged tunnels. So we experimented with some very basic caterpillar tunnels. We are changing some of those structures, the models, how we build them. So it's a work in progress. The wind can be crazy here. So that's, you know, can't go super simple.
Absolutely. Wow, what a lot of great questions. I'm so glad we had a lot of time to dive in. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I please invite you to add anything in there. If we have not yet answered, people are saying this was great. Thank you for all the great info, which was wonderful to hear. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to just really quickly throw my slides back up on the screen as we close out so you all can see their contact info. We have a survey, a brief, really short survey, just so you all can let us know how we did and whether or not hearing from the farmers made you want to buy their CSAs. So Mike will drop that link in the chat box. We'll also send a thank you email with the recording of this and the survey link probably tomorrow to everyone who registered ahead of time. So farmers, anything else you all want to add before we call it a day? This was wonderful. It was great to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting. It was really fun. And I just encourage anyone to reach out like at any time with questions or to come check it out. We love sharing what we're doing with everyone and having people learn about how their food is grown. So thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We appreciate the support. It's a big endeavor farming here, but we really do feel the support here. So hopefully we can see you all maybe a little more than we saw everyone last year, right?
Yeah, let's definitely hope so. I know I'm eager to get down onto the farm. So hopefully we'll have some opportunities to come visit and see you all at the farmers market in a couple months. And until then, people can follow you all on Instagram or reach out to you on your emails and stay connected, and hopefully sign up for your CSA or buy a market share to support you all in the 2021 season. So thank you all for being here today. Sara, Ed, Simon, thank you so much for your time. I know you all have lots to do to plan and get going on the season. So thanks for giving us an hour today to pick your brains and hear all about what you're doing. It was great. And thank you, Mike, for all your tech support, and everyone who joined us. Thank you so much.